Mr. Russo, respond there in America. America was seen as the champion of human rights, the champion of democratic rights. Along comes Donald Trump and indeed his Vice President Vance, who in Europe had comments to make about what he believed was the selectivity and hypocrisy of democratic nations when it came to free speech. Is Trump spoiling for a fight? Or, as my next question suggests, is Donald Trump the kind of person who will end wars, whether it's the war in Gaza or the war in Ukraine? Will Donald Trump be a kind of leader who will end wars, is my next question that I want to put to you, Mr. Russo. Or is he someone who has a certain contempt for the old global world order?
Well, I think what's been missing so far in the discussion, and of course it's still very early on your show today, we've talked about Europe, we've talked about the Middle East, but going back to President Obama, President Trump's first term, President Biden, it's been the stated policy, very overt, of the United States across multiple administrations that we begin shifting our attention to what is the rising strategic threat for the world, which is China, which is the Indo-Pacific. And so I suppose that this second round of Trump, you've seen an acceleration of things that he hinted at, demanding that Europeans step up their own security arrangements and spending. This time, no time to waste. He's got 1 4-year term left. And for these big changes that he hinted at last time around, really trying to accelerate those initial days in office. So, we've talked a lot about destabilization and of course, pressing for peace in both Europe as well as the Middle East. In my neck of the woods, focusing more on the Indo-Pacific, you've seen a little bit more stability, outreach to traditional partners. Japan, of course, a great visit by Indian Prime Minister last week. So I think at the end of the day, they haven't articulated it quite so strongly. But what you're going to see in a drawdown from Europe is really a continuation and acceleration of what he hinted at last time. And I suspect you're going to see an acceleration of a lot of partnerships in the Indo-Pacific across the next 3.5 years of the administration. So that certainly follows on peace, security, human rights, just aiming for, I think, a different foe, a different challenge that we see.
Let me take that to Andrew Lewing there in China. How are you seeing what's happening at the moment from a Chinese perspective? There is some commentary which suggests Donald Trump dealing with Russia directly has left the Chinese feeling red-faced. Or do the Chinese believe that they can do a deal with Trump? Is Trump the ultimate deal maker? As I said, my next question was, is Trump the right person to end the war in Ukraine, for example? And where would that leave China if Trump goes ahead and does a direct deal with the Russians on Ukraine?
I think that China has been watching the Trump administration very, very carefully since Trump 1.0. Of course, the tariffs part is nothing new. I mean, it's doubling down on it, and it's imposing tariffs not only on China, but on friends alike. So that's something new. Now, but what is startling, of course, even to Chinese observers, is that he's torn away the fig leaf from this rhetoric of so-called American-led liberal order. According to many scholars, the so-called liberal world order is neither liberal or world or based on American dominance in the first place. But now even the fig leaf is now removed. So he's introducing the rules of the jungle, trampling on the sovereignty of even close allies like Canada and Mexico and Panama. And it's also sanctioning or putting tariffs on friends alike. And then he's even belittling European nations.
Does China fear a Trump administration now, given what's happened over the last few weeks? Or does China has China been unsettled by what's happened?
Well, China is well prepared, much more prepared for Trump compared with Trump 1.0, because since Trump 1.0, during the Biden administration, under the directive of President Xi, the country is now has been embarking on self-reliance on technology, and it's been very successful. Look at what's happening on even on AI in the form of a game-changing, a deep seek kind of platform. Look at China's independently developing its own space stations and bringing soil samples from the backside of the moon. So I think that China is now doubling down on not only self-reliance on technology, but on expanding its trade with the global South.
That's very interesting. I'm just stopping you for a moment. You're making a very interesting observation. Actually, the rise of Trump is also leading China to push for greater self-reliance, to look for technology. We've seen what they've done with DeepSeek. We've seen the manner in which China, in a way, is also strengthening itself